I want fruitfulness and blossoms in my garden, on my homestead, in my life. It's not springtime, it's actually January. Have you ever wondered if it was too late to get that garden chore done that you probably should have done in fall, but now it's winter, it's even maybe the start of the year, maybe even spring? Is it too late? We're gonna talk about that today. Welcome to Scofield Farm, I'm Carice, and today I'm just working a little bit out in the front of my house. I have a lot of cleanup to do among my irises. January is not traditionally the time to clean up and divide your irises, but this is how real life looks for us. Sometimes we get behind on projects. That's okay. I figure doing it late is better than never. I'd like to have you along with me. I love my irises. It's crazy. We have such nice weather. Some of them are starting to bloom. These are my irises. I will have to put up on the screen what they look like when they are in full bloom, but you can see actually this part, I started to clean up a different day. Most of them look absolutely a mess like this. I had my son cut kind of a border from our yard, not really grass, but yard, to my irises because we have Bermuda grass and it basically takes over and is like a weed into my flowers. So my job today is hopefully cleaning these up, and then I'm going to talk to you about what to do when you want to get things done in the garden and you ran out of time and it's not the ideal time that everyone on the charts tells you to do something. See this? Like, I have irises putting up flowers in January. It's been nice weather. It's probably about 60 degrees right now. I'm not ready for that. Believe me when I say I'm not complaining about the nice weather or complaining about early flowers. I just didn't do the cleanup out here that I wanted to, and so I'm wanting to make sure that I can at least clean them up and then maybe even thin some, because thinning irises helps them bloom better. I had beautiful blooms last year, some really nice ones the year before, but if irises get too crowded, the rhizomes, then it can actually make them bloom less. So it's good to divide them. If you have another place to plant, that's great. Or if you give them away or sell them, that's also great. It's just, you don't want them to get too crowded. I already cleaned up here a little bit. I'm just cutting a little bit, snipping the brown parts off. A lot of the brown parts are actually, I think, not damaged from the cold. We don't get that terribly cold up here in Northern California. We are zone 9B. What we tend to get more damage from is from the heat. We are a Mediterranean climate, and so we have very dry, hot summers. And by hot, I think we had a day in June last year that got up to 122. So that can be rough on flowers that are over here on the west side of my property. That means they get the hottest sun of the entire day, the brutal heat. They have sun bearing down on them. Usually my irises, they do just fine. They are pretty hardy. If you're in a climate like ours and are wondering what kind of flower that you can plant on the west side that's not going to completely shrivel up in full sun and brutal hot full sun, irises are a very good way to go. I've had a lot of success with them when a lot of other things like clematis and stuff are too tender and too sensitive. The iris seems very vigorous and very tolerant of the heat. You don't actually have to trim off the brown parts. Last year I did not get around to this. My irises bloomed just beautiful, but then below them there were some of my green leaves that were a little bit brown, and I felt like it detracted just a little bit from their stunning beauty. I also am going to be taking some of my rhizomes out to actually plant in a different section of my front yard. I'll show you where that is later. But anything that looks overly crowded, I'm just gonna break a little bit off to just give a little breathing room for the ones that remain to hopefully have time for at least those to bloom better. I know that the ones we plant this late aren't going to bloom this year, but they're just kind of an investment into the beauty of the front of our house in future years. When I talk about breaking apart the rhizomes, you can see that it kind of looks like ginger or turmeric down here. Irises like to be planted shallow. You don't want this really deep under the soil. You want them where the rhizomes are just kind of peeking out. They will actually bloom better that way. If your irises are not blooming, chances are you have them either overcrowded or you have them planted too deep. So I'm gonna pull just a little bit out of some of these to give more room for blooming. Now, rhizomes also multiply just like bulbs. See this one? We can transplant this. It even has roots coming off of it in a different area, and then that gives this section just a tiny bit of breathing room. I'm not making them thin by any stretch of the imagination. I just want to lightly prune them so that this late in the season and year, they aren't, disturbed too much, but they will actually bloom better. I think I can probably take one from this section. This section is very, very thick. Oh goodness. Let's see if I can get into here. This is a very thick section right here. I think I could probably take a little bit out. Now you can use like a shovel. Woo! I'm not, but I also fell backwards. This is what it looks like. I just gave a tiny bit of room, not even that much room. I probably could fit it a lot more, but that helps. This will go somewhere else. We share all sorts of imperfect gardening and homesteading around here. Would you take a second to press the like button? That way YouTube shows more people our videos, and if you can relate to trying to get things done, sometimes like a step behind, but you're doing it and you're checking it off your list, give us a follow. I'd love to have you along and be part of the community. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you grow irises, if you have actually divided and cleaned yours up this year. I can't be the only one, right, who waited this long. I am finding in here both Bermuda grass and dead parts of my irises from before. And I'm kind of just filling this little trench with some of the stuff like a mulch. So when my son moved the dirt, it looks like he moved some of it up onto these irises. So I'm kind of gonna also uncover them. Or this also could be from moles and gophers. They also will do little mounds of dirt that are not helpful to your iris. That's a grass. Okay. Just kind of combing my fingers through. Gonna get it kind of messy, but it's gonna look better when we're done. Just to show you, it's this messy in the middle of my irises. Some of this is grass, some of it is dead from last year. This is the one I'm in the process with. It looks a little cleaner. This is the one that I've cleaned out. That gives them a lot more space to breathe. I am pulling some Bermuda that is wanting to grow in between some of this. I honestly can't tell if my son got this dirt up here or if this was from a gopher. but I am moving it a little bit, trying to get it clean in between, trying to get those grasses out that are going to choke it. Oh, I can't stand Bermuda because it really does choke everything out around it, and it has these little, like, gives off these little shoots underground where it spreads. It's very hard to really get rid of it, even with doing like wood chip mulch, which we do a lot to try to drown it out from sunlight. Still very, very difficult to control it. Okay, this is kind of a mess. There's definitely too much dirt in here, and I wouldn't even necessarily call it soil. It really looks like the clay dirt. We don't want it mounted up this high. It could make these irises over here not bloom. They want to have their rhizomes just around the soil line of where they're planted. They don't want them to be super deep, as I had mentioned. So trying to clean that part up. The other day I didn't do it with gloves, and I got tons of splinters from these all over my hands. So I'm being smarter. I'm not really a gardener that uses gloves a lot, but I'm being smarter today and at least protecting my hands a little bit. So this whole section right here looks so much better, and I want to show you up close. This is how the bases are supposed to be. See how you can see the rhizome? And over here, these still have a little too much dirt at the bottom. I've been digging around trying to expose. You can see I'm finally getting it kind of exposed. It will actually bloom better if it's exposed. This is a super slow process. I mean, this is like nothing done compared to what is not done. And because we have such nice weather, I think a lot of this is probably going to start blooming before I'm ready. But I have to have the mentality that doing something is better than doing nothing. That's something you'll hear me talk about a lot, is doing something is better than doing nothing. And I kind of am a recovering idealist, perfectionist, thinking that if I didn't do it right, maybe it wasn't worth doing at all. But really, doing it, the process is worth it even more than the results. I mean, the results are amazing, don't get me wrong. But the process of actually doing something is so worth it. Oh my goodness, I have one blooming. Let me show you this. I didn't even know that this one's blooming yet. Please forgive the Bermuda grass taking over, but right here, there is an iris. So I may have been too late for weeding these for the growth, but look at that. Look at that, you guys. That is an iris blooming in January. There's a couple more down here. This one, you can kind of see the light on it. Just beautiful. Could I just gently open it? I don't know. So pretty. January, you guys, January. Oh, I should have done this in the fall, but late is better than never. And I definitely have my work cut out for me. As I said, Bermuda grass. It is not, we didn't plant it. It was here when we got the property, but it chokes out everything. I need to kind of have a ditch dug along the side, kind of like a barrier, like my son did the other area, to hopefully give me a fighting chance of getting it out. I have made other gardening videos about how the process of gardening, just getting out in the outdoors, the sunshine, the vitamin D, the hard work, the focus, and kind of the mental clarity, mental health aspect of it is so worth it, even when sometimes the results are disappointing or maybe not exactly what we hope for. I'll link that video in the description below. I think that when I look at this and I think, okay, chances are it's going to take me weeks, realistically. I mean, it could take me days, but realistically weeks, because I am recovering still from a back issue and stuff, to actually get this whole line weeded out, pulled out. Maybe my son will be able to work over there where I showed you the blooming iris is where I actually want to continue that line of irises all the way down and plant the thinned ones over there. I'd like it kind of lining the whole front of my property. That's kind of the goal. We planted these, I think we only did about 20 originally. About 5 years ago, we thinned irises for my sister's house. And so these are like the babies of her irises. And so that area will be like the grandbabies because it'll be from thinning this as well. Even if I don't completely finish, I'm in this as a long game, not as like a short-term rewards. I may be a little too late for this gardening season, ideally, but everything I do now is going to make it easier for me next year and in the fall to actually clean up and thin these adequately. So I'm kind of ahead of the game. I'm kind of working ahead so that this next fall will really be doable. I had shoulder surgery last January, just a year ago, and so that's part of why I got so far behind on a lot of these tasks that weren't specifically the veggie garden, because growing food, when we had to prioritize what we were giving our efforts to, that made the most sense. These kept blooming, even not taken care of. But now I have more work on my plate because I did not do something the fall before. That would be like fall 2023 and then fall 2024. I didn't get out here either. So I'm kind of playing a little bit of catch up. If we do something with weeding and pulling out, you know, stray grasses like Bermuda grass, or taking off the dead stuff or thinning, it will be easier every season to maintain. When we get behind, we're kind of digging out of a pit of a backlog of work that kind of is our own fault. So I always tell people the best thing for the garden is the gardener, because that means we're present and we're noticing things. And even if we're doing just a little bit at a time, like we're gardening like 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, but we're consistently doing something, it makes it so much easier to stay on top of things and not have the mess that I currently have and that I'm dealing with. This is the progress. I've been working for a little while. I actually have to go help my son go test drive a car he might buy. He's 18, almost 19, buying his first vehicle of his own. Have a lot left to do, but I feel like pretty accomplished that this section looks so much better. Real life gardening is, there will be interruptions, especially if you have a large family like I do. We have 7 kids. We actually pastor a local community and homeschool, do all sorts of things, but gardening is not the only thing we get to do. Homesteading is not the only thing we get to do. So we fit it in to the small windows that we can, but I feel pretty accomplished. I want to show you how many of the rhizomes that I have divided so far. This is pretty good. Obviously I've got a lot left to do, but this is going to be new irises down the other side of my property. And as I finish, I think I'm going to actually end up with enough to plant all the way down that line. And then maybe the next year we'll do the other side so we can be totally lined with irises. It's a different day. You can tell by what I'm wearing. And I came back out to work more on the irises, and I've got a lot left to do. Like if I look down the line of how much is not done compared to how much is done, it can be super overwhelming. And I'm just gonna take a second, and some of you may know, my husband and I pastor a small community up in Northern California. So I'm gonna put on my pastor's hat for a moment, take off my gardening apron and gloves, and just talk about how dividing, cleaning up the irises relates to life and struggle in life. Because I've been thinking a lot this January about how humans thrive and grow through struggle. And here's the deal. I got really far behind on my irises and a lot of things in my gardening and my homestead because of physical issues, very legitimate reasons. I had shoulder surgery almost exactly a year ago when I post this video. I had back issues. I was in a car accident a couple years ago that actually, triggered the chain of events to have surgery. My husband had a couple things break and had surgery himself on his knee. And so it's been a tough year, but honestly, like 3 years. If we kind of look at where things started, I got behind on so many things. And it can be so easy as a human being to see the enormity of a task that has been neglected for a long time and to quit. And I'm thinking just how gardening and homesteading and dealing with these irises, weeding them, dealing with the enormous mounds of dirt and rocks that the Gopher Hills put smack in the middle of them, trying to divide them so that they will actually be fruitful and they will bloom, because irises don't want to be buried. They don't want to be crowded to bloom. I want fruitfulness and blossoms in my garden, on my homestead, in my life. And sometimes when we get behind, it just is going to take a lot more hard work. If we stay on top of weeding and doing the hard tasks, it is always easier. I tell my kids when they have the dishes chore that if they wash the dishes, like the big pots and pans and blender, right away, it is so much faster. If they let it pile up all day long, things are crusted on and it's literally going to take more time to wash those dishes. When a gardener is not in their garden doing the daily tasks of weeding and just being aware of what's happening, being aware there are gophers or pests, and being able to deal with it more timely, it is going to compound. And compound interest, like any loan, becomes really, really large and can be very overwhelming. And I want to just encourage you, as a fellow human being who has struggled in my life, who has got behind in my garden, but honestly in other areas of life, that it is worth it to do the hard work. And even if the work is harder, doing it now than if we had been able to do it daily, if we've been able to deal with things regularly. And you guys, I am talking about relationships. I am talking about marriages. I am talking about our health. I am talking about schooling. Doing well in a class means regularly attending, regularly doing the homework, reading the readings. If we leave everything to compile, it is going to be so difficult. But it is not more virtuous to quit. It is more virtuous to pick up the shovel, the gloves, the pruning shears, get a little dirty, get a little sore, and do the hard work. And the hard work is going to take time. It is not going to be something that we can deal with right away. There is not a quick Band-Aid fix for things that were neglected, even if they were neglected because of legitimate reasons. And I am really talking to myself as I talk to you. Sometimes it can feel more virtuous to give up on the marriage, to quit that college class that is just hard because we got behind, to stop taking care of our physical health because the test results may feel daunting. But you guys, it is not more virtuous to quit. It is more virtuous to do the little bit we can do over and over and over again. And even if I somehow, my back has told me, stop, and I have to take things slow because of physical issues. But if I only get half of these irises cleaned up, and this season the other half aren't finished, it was worth it to do the work that I did. It will ultimately get me ahead. It will ultimately help reach the goals that I want so badly. I want blossoms. I want fruitfulness. I know that we all do. I know that you want to be fruitful in your life. So if you would join me this year in just focusing on doing what we can, and that might feel small and it might feel a drop in the bucket. It might feel like barely anything to work on this little clump of irises when there's a huge fence line, and there's a whole other fence line over there that I haven't even thought about. But doing the little clump that we can, we've got to believe that putting in the effort over and over again to dig out of a pit that maybe we created for ourselves. Maybe we didn't. Maybe it is absolutely not our fault, but digging out of the pit to believe that what we do has purpose and has a goal and is going to achieve something meaningful to us. That is the way that we overcome hard things. That is the way that we achieve fruitfulness and beauty and blooming in our lives. And so, as both a gardener and as a pastor and as a friend, I ask you to consider, what is it that you need to dig out of? There's a lot of things that come to my mind, physically, emotionally, in my garden, on my homestead. There's so many things, but if I can have vision, if you can have vision, we can do things that are hard and we can create beauty in our lives. And I didn't even think I was going to go here. But when I was just thinking about, man, I don't think I can get this task done in time to post this video. I think I'm going to have to post it unfinished. I really had to wrestle with, is it worth it? Is what the work I've done worth it? Even though it's been hard, even though it would have been so much easier to actually keep up with it over this last several years and been dividing and cleaning and dealing with gopher issues, but is what I've done now worth it? And I have to say yes, and it's worth it for you too. So find that thing that you want to see fruitful, that you want to see thrive, and do the little bit you can along with me. And together we are going to actually make a difference in our lives, in our relationships, in growing food, taking care of our family, being present in what we do, in our goals, in our health, in our schooling, our education. Thank you guys, and I will see you in the next video. And hopefully before summer, I get this iris bed cleaned up little by little, doing what I can.